My name is Dan. I'm an instructor from Learn Kubernetes, and today I'm going to talk about resource and requests and limits. So you're probably familiar with this scenario. You've got a cluster, 2 nodes, and one has got some space, the other doesn't. Now, you probably know that the pod will be landed on the only node on the left. But what happens when there are no requests? Right? How does Kubernetes know where this pod is going to be located? Well, there is no information, so Kubernetes doesn't know where to put it. You can put it either way. So to prevent this problem, what we do is we set requests, right? And that's basically what we do. We open this YAML file and we write the requests in this pod specification. But requests comes also with something else called limit. And on top of that, you need to think about that this application can fluctuate the usage between the request and the limit. It doesn't end there, though. The application could use less resources than the request that you define. So here we have a couple of scenarios. So you can define the request, and the requests are always guaranteed. So if you say 200 millicores, then those cores are gone. But if the application uses a fraction of that, then the rest is underutilized. No one can take it away from you. So if you were to chart this, you will see that you're basically wasting all of the resources that you requested, but you're not using. Now, what about the opposite, right? You could have a request, you could have a limit, and on average, the actual user for your application is always over the request. How is this bad? Well, generally, you're using more than what you declared, okay? And this could cause quite a lot of problems, because if all pods were to use that much resources, then there will be contention, right? So you're basically in between 2 scenarios. The first scenario is, okay, pod are contending for resources, and you get P99 latency, you see some very bad developer experience. On the other side is, okay, I can give more resources, but I'm actually paying more, right? So you're in between these 2 things. And it gets even worse, because if your application has got high spikes on either side, then it's very hard for you to actually set the right request and limits. It could be asymmetric as well, but what you really want is basically have a very, very narrow sort of interval where the request stays mostly close to what you define. So how do we do that? Well, if we have applications that have got wide intervals, what we could do is we could actually divide these intervals into smaller intervals. And for each of them, we could actually consider just the smaller interval instead of the full interval for the request. So if we do that for all, for the rest of the time, then what we could see is that these intervals where we define the request are much narrower than the overall interval that we started with. And so we just translated the problem of having like very huge spikes in memory, for example, to having like very small and defined period intervals with narrow requests. But I cheated. And the way I cheated is basically I knew in advance where these requests were going to go. But most of the time, when you're running workloads, you don't know if the request is going to go up, it's going to stay the same, or it's going to go down. You don't even know how big the interval is going to be, right? And this is basically where we see innovation in the space. And a simple tool that you might have heard of is the vertical pod autoscaler. And that's basically exactly how it works. It will basically divide the time and then just trying to predict based on the past performance what should be the next request, right? So that's how the vertical pod autoscaler. Now, the vertical pod autoscaler has got a very simple mechanism to detect that. So there are other toolings that you find in the ecosystem that do that with more advanced machine learning model. So you might have heard Stormforge, PepperScale, Cubex from Densify, ScaleOps. There are many more. I think the important thing to remember, and I think this is news from this week, is that most of these are actually being acquired. So we see the market being consolidated as more and more companies are using this product to optimize the requests and limits. Okay, so takeaway, always set your requests. And there are basically two scenarios for these requests. You go over and under, and then ideally, you don't just set them once. you keep adapting, you keep changing them, ideally with some tooling, open source tooling or tooling that you can find in the ecosystem. That was me. Thank you very much for listening.